Brought to you by Thomas Allgaier and Frennis. This edition highlights key LinkedIn posts on next-gen vehicle intelligence in weeks 7 and 8. Frennis supports automotive enterprises and consultancies with market and competitive intelligence, decoding disruptive technologies, customer needs, regulatory change, and competitive moves so product teams and strategy leaders don't just react, but shape the future of mobility.
It is definitely a critical time for those strategy leaders right now.
Hello and welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're taking a hard look at the industry conversation from calendar weeks 7 and 8 of 2026. And I have to say, going through the stack of posts for this session, the mood music has definitely changed.
Oh, it really has. I mean, the last few years were all about the vision, the glossy decks, the concept cars, the wild promises for 2030. Well, weeks 7 and 8 felt like a pretty harsh wake-up call.
Yeah.
The honeymoon phase is officially over.
That is exactly the feeling I got too. It's less about what if and much more about, oh, wow, we actually have to build this stuff now. We just aren't seeing as many abstract predictions on the feed. The conversation has shifted into the gritty reality of execution.
Right.
Operational scaling, and honestly, the sheer headache of making software-defined vehicles work in the real world.
It's the difference between being the architect drawing the blueprints and being the construction manager actually pouring the concrete. We are seeing a massive pivot toward industrial discipline right now.
So, we have a packed agenda for you today. We're going to break this down into a few key clusters. First, we're tackling the SDV reality check, moving from PowerPoints to patch management.
Yes.
Then we'll look at the portfolio approach to autonomy and the intensifying data wars. We'll slide into the cockpit to discuss the chip wars in China and the rise of AI agents. And finally, we'll look at connectivity and the market dynamics shaking up giants like Toyota.
It is a really dense couple of weeks. Let's get right into it.
Let's start with that first theme, SDV realities. For a long time, the software-defined vehicle was this magical buzzword for infinite revenue streams.
Yeah.
But Sachin Podrashet posted something that felt like a bucket of cold water. He basically said that in 2026, nobody cares about your strategy slide.
That line really stood out to me. Sachin is arguing that for years, SDV was basically theater. It was about clean sheet architectures and getting applause at CES.
Exactly.
But now that the rubber is hitting the road, the metric for success isn't a flashy monetization dashboard. It is simply, can you patch 95% of a fleet in 48 hours without bricking 2% of the vehicles?
That bricking concept is terrifying when you put it in this context.
Right.
I mean, if I brick my phone, I go to the store. If an OEM bricks 2% of an entire fleet...
That is thousands of stranded assets on the side of the highway.
Right. It's a logistical nightmare.
And a total brand killer. Sachin's point is that the new business model isn't features, it's reliability. It is industrial discipline. It's about whether you can execute at true automotive scale. It's not sexy, but it's what actually keeps the company alive.
But if everyone in the industry knows this is the goal, why is it still such a struggle? Johannes Krieg had a really interesting take on this. He suggests the technology for SDV is actually largely in place.
Yeah, we know how to do OTA updates.
Exactly. The bottleneck now is organizational.
Johannes is spot on here. He introduces this concept of software-defined teams. Think about a traditional automaker. They are hierarchical, rigid. They're built to minimize risk through endless committees. You cannot build a decentralized, agile software architecture if your company is organized like a factory from the 1950s.
So Conway's law strikes again. The product reflects the organization.
Precisely. Krieg argues you can't have a committee meeting every single time you need to deploy code. You need decentralized teams empowered to deploy directly to the vehicle. But that requires a level of trust and agility that most legacy OEMs just don't have yet.
And Vinicius Design added another layer to this chaos, fragmentation. He points out that in many companies, the software development team, the factory floor, and the fleet operations are living in 3 completely different worlds.
Right, the classic silo problem. Zine talks about lifecycle continuity. If your developers don't understand the physical constraints of the factory, or if the fleet managers can't feed real-world data back to the developers because the systems just don't talk to each other, your costs compound rapidly.
Yeah.
If those links are broken, you aren't running an SDV. You are just managing really expensive chaos.
There was also a specific data point regarding regional differences that I hadn't really considered before. H. Manguino pointed out a stark contrast in fleet velocity between China and the West.
This is critical for anyone trying to build a global platform. Manguino notes that in China, the average fleet age is about 5.5 years. It's a very young vehicle fleet. In the US and Europe, it's 11 or 12 years plus.
That is a massive gap in terms of hardware capability out on the roads.
It changes the entire engineering strategy. China competes on velocity, rapid iteration, because the hardware on the road is newer and can actually handle heavier, more complex software. The West is competing on life cycles, which means backward compatibility. If you are an engineer in Europe, you have to make sure your brand new software update works perfectly on a chip from 2014.
So if you try to make one single global SDV roadmap,
You're in serious trouble. You either move too slow for the Chinese market and get crushed by local competitors, or you break the old cars in Europe and anger your loyal customer base. Mingwino's insight is that a single global roadmap might actually be impossible to execute efficiently.
that is a sobering thought.
Yeah.
Let's move on to our second cluster, ADS, autonomy, and what we are calling the data wars. The narrative used to be a straight line, level 2, then level 3, then level 4.
And that straight line is totally gone. Augustin Friedel had a great breakdown of this. He argues we are seeing a portfolio strategy emerge. The idea that everyone just goes to level 3 next is fading fast.
Level 3 being that traffic jam pilot where the car drives, but you have to take over if it gets confused.
Right, which turns out to be a legal and technical nightmare. So Augustin says OEMs are splitting their bets. You have level 2++ scaling up for the mass market. That's really good driver assistance where the human is still fully liable. And then level 4 is being treated as a completely separate operating model, mostly for robotaxis.
So it's not a progression anymore, it's a fork in the road.
Exactly. And it is messy. OEMs are multi-sourcing to avoid vendor lock-in. You might see a single OEM using one stack for China, one for Europe, and a completely different science project stack for their robotaxis.
Speaking of stacks, there's a lot of drama right now around open versus closed ecosystems. Dr. Gabriel Seiberth posted about Elon Musk basically shouting from the rooftops, warning the rest of the industry to license Tesla's full self-driving.
The classic join us or die pitch.
Exactly. But Seiberth argues the industry just isn't listening. They don't want to just be a hardware shell for Tesla's software. They are pivoting heavily to open platforms. He points specifically to NVIDIA's Alpamayo, calling it the Android of autonomous driving.
That Android analogy is key here. Sarah Tariq from NVIDIA chimed in on this too. She explained that even though NVIDIA is traditionally known as a hardware company, they are building full autonomy stacks now. End-to-end reasoning, safety systems. They are building the foundation so OEMs can build on top of it, rather than just handing over the keys to a direct competitor like Tesla.
It's fascinating to see the chip makers moving so far up the software stack. We also saw a major move toward transparency from Electrobit and Mobileye. Christoph Herzig and Maria Anholt highlighted their partnership to integrate open-source Linux for safety applications.
This is a huge deal for the software engineers listening. Traditionally, safety-critical systems, like your brakes or steering, were proprietary black boxes. You did not touch them. Moving to open-source Linux in a level 4 system shows a major desire for transparency. It's about building genuine trust in the system, not just hiding the secret sauce.
And trust really comes from data, but not just hoarding it, actually using it. Peter Bosch and Manuel Burke from Cariad shared how they are processing millions of data points for friction alerts.
This is a perfect example of connected data actually doing something useful. The car detects a slippery patch of road, processes it in real time, and warns other drivers behind it. It's not theoretical monetization on a whiteboard, it's operational safety out in the real world.
And Keo Buosi took this a step further regarding mapping. He says the era of the dedicated mapping car, those vehicles with the giant spinning cameras on the roof, is ending.
Yes, Kyo predicts that future apps will be built passively. Every consumer vehicle becomes a mapping unit just by driving to the grocery store. It creates a scalable, continuous loop that a fleet of dedicated drivers could never match. Why pay a driver when your customers can map the world for you for free?
Highly efficient. All right, let's shift gears to theme 3, the chip war and the AI cockpit. This is where the geopolitical tension really starts to bleed into the technology.
It absolutely is. Özgür Nurettin flagged a major shift happening in the Chinese market. For years, Qualcomm was the undisputed king. If you had a premium car, you had a Snapdragon chip running the screens. But that monopoly is cracking.
Who is taking the market share?
Local players, primarily Huawei and SemiDrive. And Özgür explains that this isn't just about nationalism or trade tariffs, it is a fundamental technology reset. As the cockpit shifts to AI agents and on-device large language models, new players are seizing the opportunity to define that new architecture. Huawei is building an ecosystem where your phone, your smart home, and your car all speak the exact same AI language natively.
So the cockpit is moving from just being smart to being truly intelligent.
That is the crucial distinction. Ping An predicts that by 2026, The cockpit moves from feature stacking, which is just adding more and more apps to a screen, to human AI experience loops. It's about multimodal agent. The car understands your voice, your gaze, your gestures simultaneously.
Stefano Marzani had a really great example of this regarding Ferrari.
Ferrari is such a great case study because they can't just slap a generic iPad on the dash and call it a day. Stefano notes they are prioritizing integrated design. It's how the human-machine interface works in tandem with the chassis. The smartness has to fit the brand DNA. A Ferrari AI can't feel like a generic customer service chatbot. It has to feel like a Ferrari.
I love that. But amidst all this talk of AI and eye tracking and advanced chips, Christian Kick threw in a low-tech surprise that I actually really enjoyed.
Oh, the minivans.
Yes. He noted that minivans are seeing a massive sales resurgence, particularly with millennial dads.
It's such a great reality check for the industry. Christian points out that despite all the AI hype and screen tech, practicality, space, and utility still drive the actual purchasing decisions. You can have the smartest AI in the world, but if you can't fit the kids and the hockey gear in the back, you aren't buying the car.
Very true. Let's move to theme 4, connectivity, V2X, and infrastructure. V2X, vehicle-to-everything communication, feels like it has been the next big thing for, 20 years now?
It really has, always 5 years away. But Roger C. Langtot posted about V2X vibing again. There is renewed interest, potentially driven by the U.S. Department of Transportation and Qualcomm pushing the standard.
But automakers are still pretty skeptical of the hardware costs, right?
They are. Adding dedicated radios isn't cheap. But Ahmad Jawad counters this with the safety imperative. He argues that using CV2X for things like intersection collision avoidance and emergency vehicle preemption is becoming a real priority for reducing traffic fatalities. It's shifting from a nice-to-have feature to a we need to stop people dying conversation.
And we are seeing connectivity go beyond just cellular networks now. Linda Hardesty reported on Viasat and BMW demonstrating satellite connectivity directly to the car.
This is crucial for seamless coverage. If you are in a remote area, cellular inevitably fails. Satellite ensures that the software-defined part of the vehicle doesn't just disappear because you drove into a canyon. The car stays connected.
On the commercial side, Andreas Josko at Mercedes-Benz Trucks announced they're launching vehicle data APIs.
I really liked his phrasing on this. He said they're allowing logistics companies to bake their own cake. Instead of forcing a fleet manager to use a specific rigid Mercedes portal, they just provide the raw data via an API. The logistics company can ingest that data directly into their own custom systems. It's a move toward the kind of openness that commercial customers have been demanding for years.
Finally, let's unpack theme 5, market dynamics and geopolitics, because you simply cannot talk about 2026 without talking about the tension between East and West.
It is the massive elephant in the room for every boardroom right now.
Steve Greenfield posted about the anxiety among U.S. auto execs regarding comments from Donald Trump inviting Chinese plants to the U.S. Now, regardless of any political leanings, the business reality reported here is that there's massive strategic uncertainty.
It's a fascinating dilemma. Steve notes that companies like Geely are heavily eyeing the U.S. market. The incumbents are torn. Do they defend aggressively against this competition, or do they try to partner with them to survive the transition? It reflects a much broader anxiety that the Chinese OEMs are simply moving faster and building cheaper.
And amidst this chaos, Toyota made a massive leadership change. Hans Greimel covered the appointment of Kenta Kon as CEO. And the key detail here is he's a finance guy, not an engineer.
Which is a huge signal to the market. Hans points out that Toyota needs a war chest. They know they have to fund a massive, incredibly expensive shift to software and AI to compete with China and Silicon Valley. Appointing a finance veteran signals they are prioritizing strict financial discipline to survive that transition. They need to make maximum profit on the current hardware to fund the software of the future.
It's a wartime CEO move, but for a financial war.
Exactly. It's about capital allocation over pure engineering.
So looking back at all these insights from weeks 7 and 8 of 2026, what is the ultimate takeaway for you?
The vibe has moved from dreaming to doing. We are completely done with the vision videos and the empty promises. It's about operations, it's about closing these data loops, and it's about regional diversification. And frankly, for a lot of these legacy players, it's just about survival at this point.
Operations don't get the applause, as Sachin said earlier.
No, they don't. But operations are what actually keep the cars running and the balance sheets out of the red.
That brings up a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over as we wrap up. If operations, patching, and pure financial discipline are the new kings of the automotive industry, What happens to the pure car enthusiast culture? In a world where vehicles are just nodes on a software network managed by finance CEOs who's going to keep building cars just for the sheer joy of driving, it's something to think about as these architectures take over.
A great question to end on.
If you enjoy this episode, new episodes drop every 2 weeks. Also, check out our other editions on electrification and battery technology, future mobility and market evolution, and commercial fleet insights. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and don't forget to subscribe.
Thanks for listening, everyone.